kind of decks.
He's used to playing around all the stuff. He knows all their tricks. It's all straightforward. A lot of people play Delver. Not a lot of people play Infect. I can't imagine that Jared has much practice against this deck.
He's going to start things off with the Delver of Secrets off of Volcanic Island. Tom will draw a card for the turn. You can see he has a Glistener Health in his hand already. A couple copies of Blight Agent as well. It's always a delight to watch Ross kind of bob and weave around these removal spells and get the job done. He's done it before. We'll see if he can do it again. As he does start off with the 1/1 Infect creature that will get countered via Daze.
Yeah, sometimes that's all you need with this Delver deck is to stop their one threat and leave them with a bunch of semi-useless pump spells in their hand. And especially if you have a Delver of Secrets on turn 1, especially if it transforms on turn 2 naturally, you definitely have everything you need to just take a commanding lead in the game.
And Site Celebration does show up. It gets into the red zone. Ross is already down to 17. Boettcher revealed a Daze, so Tom is going to have to play around that Daze. Tom will play a Forest. This is another copy of Glistener Elf to try to play around Daze to the best of his ability. Looks like that's going to work out. So Boettcher will untap and draw here. Picks up a copy of Force of Will. You see a Misty Rainforest in his hand. He can play that as a second land if he'd like, and he will. See if he'd like to attack first. Maybe cast that Lightning Bolt that is in his hand, but he will serve in for 3 here. Put Ross down to 14. You see Tom in his hand. He's got a Spell Pierce and Invigorate hanging out over there. Boettcher will go with Lightning Bolt to try to get the Glistener Elf off the table, and Tom says that's fine.
Yeah, Spell Pierce not much help here when he knows that Jared has a Daze. Doesn't really want to walk into that. He could have used the Invigorate, but I do like saving that when you already have a few other creatures in your hand, whereas you don't have a lot of pump spells.
Now, creatures, something Tom has plenty of.
Right.
I believe he has 2 Blight Agents, and he just drew a copy of Inkmoth Nexus, so creatures don't look to be much of a problem here, but he is under the gun. He is being attacked for 3 damage a turn.
Yep.
So he just has to be a little bit wary of that, and of course Lightning Bolts will give Boettcher some reach if he does find another one of those. Now, Tom is going to play Inkmoth Nexus. He's going to deploy a Blighted Agent again, playing around Daze here. We'll see if Boettcher has some interest in maybe casting Force of Will. You can see in Jared's hand right now, he does have his Batter Skull, but that's not going to be very useful this game.
No, both a little too slow and the lifelink not incredibly relevant.
Boettcher kind of giving this a long thought, I think, on if he's supposed to Force of Will this or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of awkward. You sort of want to, but on the other hand, Tom does have the Inkmoth Nexus, so...
And he will force that. So kind of what's happening here is Jared's fighting over all the creatures.
Yeah.
And so you have to imagine that if Tom finally gets one of these creatures in play, he's just going to, invigorate, try to kill you. Assuming that, there's probably not any counter magic hanging out over there, though Boettcher did draw a Lightning Bolt for the turn. So Ross will untap after taking 3 more. He is at 11 now, draws a copy of Vines, a Vastwood. See the Verdant Catacombs in his hand. Curious how many cards Boettcher has in the grip. I believe it's 2.
Yeah, you kind of see the power of the Infect deck here where Tom could go for 9 poison right now.
Yep.
And even after getting his first 3 threats dealt with. I mean, if he did that, he would walk into Daze. And, well, I guess he Force of Will to away the Daze.
Yeah, the Daze is actually gone. He doesn't have to worry about that now.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean there's not another one hiding out in Boettcher's hand.
Right.
I definitely understand what you're saying there. Gonna go get a Trop, go down to 10 to get that.
Yeah, just this Infect deck is a little bit more resilient than you might otherwise think. It's like, oh, well, just kill their first couple creatures and you're fine. And Jared, to his credit, has had a pretty good draw, has navigated out of the early game pretty well, and Tom still has a lot going on.
It's a Blighted Agent. Now, what I want to see here is if Tom is going to fire up this Inkmoth Nexus to try to sneak a point in.
I think that's pretty good, especially since he has 8 points of pump in his hand. If the Nexus gets in there for a point, next turn it's relatively safe to go in with Blighted Agent for 9, especially with Spell Pierce backup.
Yep, he's moving in. And Boettcher says, I'll take 1 Infect right now. We could have seen a Lightning Bolt on the Inkmoth Nexus. It makes things a little bit interesting as Tom's going to get out his own token.
Love it.
That's pretty good. And says, I got 1 on you. Got to get 9 more. Boettcher draws a copy of Delver of Secrets. His hand, again, he's got a Batter Skull, he's got a Bolt, the Delver that he's just drawn for the turn, and the other card, I believe, is a Spell Pierce, so no hard counter magic here. And trust me, Tom has had to bob and weave around Spell Pierce before. Ross is down to 7. Will pass the turn back. Will Boettcher. He's trying to hang on here. So Ross draws a card. It's a copy of Verdant Catacombs. Will the boss move in is the question.
I mean, the clock is ticking, right? He's at 7 life. Delver makes it 4 next turn. He could potentially block with Inkmoth Nexus, but I don't think that's what he wants to be doing. And if Boettcher has something like Lightning Bolt, Swords to Plowshares, it's kind of scary, right? But I feel like Tom is the expert in navigating through these situations.
He's pretty good at figuring out when it's time to pull the trigger.
Right.
You know, what he's probably doing right now is just kind of running through the combination of cards, and instead of like, okay, blue, red, Delver, what could they have in their hand?
Yeah.
You know, like, what is a card that he hasn't cast yet? Does he have Force Will plus blue card? Can I beat that? Maybe yes, maybe no. He's going to fire up Inkmoth Nexus right now. He's going to serve him both these creatures. And this is an Invigorate over there. This looks like maybe he's splitting it up a little bit. So Boettcher's going to gain some life off of that.
Yeah, not totally relevant. I've definitely heard stories about the Infect decks taking down people with like 15 points of normal damage from Noble Hierarch or whatever.
Tom's done it.
Right.
Boettcher's going to move in, cast a Lightning Bolt there. See if Tom wants the Vines or if he wants the Spell Pierce. It's very important how he sequences these.
Yeah, I agree. I think you want to play the pump spell, which forces Jared to react, because if you just go for Spell Pierce, Jared doesn't have to do anything. He could just take the infect damage, right? Whereas if you go for Vines on the creature that you're also invigorating, if he has a Source of Plowshares, then he has to use it, and then you can potentially just win the game on the spot with a Spell Pierce.
Really smart to sack the fetch line first before making a move, because let's say that Tom does cast, you know, this Vines and he has a fetch line available, Jared fights over it, and then when Tom tries to crack his fetch line, Daze happens.
Right.
You know, so it's really, really smart that he sacked the fetch land first, and then says, all right, I'm going to Vines this in response. Now Jared's going to sack his fetch land.
Yeah, I mean, it could also be like a Stifle or something. You know, like Tom wants to get all the information that he can. Like, am I going to have this Spell Pierce available before I decide whether or not to Vines?
So Jared's going to sacrifice his fetch land. He's going to go get a Tundra. He's going to cast a Spell Pierce. Tom is going to look at his Spell Pierce and says, I'm going to counter your
We're all in.
Pierce.
And that's it.
Jared says, I am beat. Tom Ross works his way through a couple bolts, couple counter spells, and a Delver flipping on turn 1 on the play for his opponent and gets the job done all in one turn. Blue-green Infect up a game over blue-red Delver. That's how it's done.
Yeah, that is how the boss plays Magic.
Sideboard time. Jared Boettcher probably has some useful tools, doesn't he?
Well, he does have a Sword of Feast and Famine, a Red Elemental Blast, a Pyroblast, a Vendilion Click, 3 Meddling Mage, a Wear Tear, 2 Grim Lavamancer, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Rest in Peace, and an additional copy of Swords to Plowshares. So basically any extra removal you're going to want. So Swords to Plowshares, Grim Lavamancer, Meddling Mage is okay, Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast are okay. Vendilion Click is another flyer, which could potentially be relevant against something like Inkmoth Nexus. That it basically means that they have to use a pump spell or just trade it up. But for the most part, like, Jared's cards are all pretty good in this matchup. I think maybe Stoneforge Mystic and True Name Nemesis are the weaker cards. They're the slower cards. They're the ones that make him have to tap out on his own turn. But being able to get a Jit active is super important, and that's kind of lights out for Tom, I think. So even though Stoneforge is not the best card, you can't really play it unless, you know, the coast is clear. I feel like something like True Name Nemesis is probably on the chopping block.
For the boss, his sideboard here, he's got a Dryad Arbor, he's got 2 Submerge, 2 Force of Will, a Necropede, 3 Crows and Grip, a Piracy Charm, a Bojuka Bog, 2 copies of Spell Pierce, and then 2 copies of Blue Elemental Blast. Do we like Submerge here?
You need a Forest. Your opponent needs a Forest.
Oh, right. Sorry, I was thinking we need one. So no.
The answer is no.
We do not like Submerge.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Just checking, making sure you're awake.
Yeah.
Good. 2 copies of Force of Will are okay. Spell Pierce was like pretty good in that game, but I don't know if it's going to be that good always. I mean, this is a pretty land-light Delver deck, so you could probably snag a Lightning Bolt or like a Spell Pierce or something like that with your own Spell Pierces, but...
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. Like, Spell Pierce should be active most of the game, especially since if Jared has a Brainstorm or Ponder, he's going to want to use that to get rid of, like, excess lands. You know, he needs all the spells he can have, because for the most part, they're trading one for one. You know, it's like a Bolt is trading with a Spell Pierce, trading with a Pump Spell, and so on and so forth. And you saw at the end of that game, Tom had expended every single resource he had. He was hellbent. All of his mana was tapped. And then because Jared had used a Force of Will and had a semi-dead Banner Skull in his hand, he didn't have enough things to stop all of Tom's things. So I'm not sure if Tom wants to like board in Force of Will and also, you know, play that game that kind of lost Jared the game.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to sideboard too much here, honestly. I mean, I know he's played against this deck a ton, so I'm sure he knows exactly what he wants to accomplish in the matchup.
I think Spell Pierce is pretty live. Force of Will is like so-so. I think that is probably mainly there to stop combo decks, not decks that are trying to one-for-one you and like kill your creatures.
All right, well, Tom is going to finish sideboarding up. You see Jared's already shuffling, so he's happy with this configuration. So while these two players do get ready to do battle, we will talk Modern Premier IQs right now, which we actually have one taking place right now. Around 150 players came to battle Modern today, so it's
not
awesome
bad
to see players coming out and doing battle for $5,000 in cash prizes, open points to all the participants, of course. Top 4 will receive invitations to an invitational, and of course we do have enhanced side event prizes as well. All 4 that we've had so far have been won by black-green decks with Thoughtseize and Tarmogoyf and all that cool stuff. 2 black-green mid-range decks, 2 junk decks. So hopefully someone will maybe break that streak, but it is kind of looking like the best deck right now.
Yeah, I would expect that streak to be broken. I mean, all it takes is like one really good Birthing Pod player to just tear that deck apart.
Yeah. We'll see what ends up happening there. But again, Modern Premier IQs, you can definitely come out to those in the open series. Of course, you can run them yourself. If you're a store owner or tournament organizer, not tough to get in touch with Star City Games about that. StarCityGames.com, our organized play department will take care of you. Again, $5,000 in cash prizes, open points to all participants. Top 4 will receive invitations to one of our invitationals and enhanced side event prizes. Definitely check those out. They're actually really, really cool, and we're glad that we can finally bring Modern here to the open series weekends. We don't want to let Legacy go because Legacy's too awesome.
Yeah, but also Modern is awesome.
So what do we do? I'm telling you next. Vintage.
Huh?
I'm on it.
Yeah?
Vintage. We're going to get it here. I want to play with Black Lotus one day. Not on Magic Online.
I thought you cut that from your fish deck.
I did, actually. It's not good in that deck. But one day I want to play with the Black Lotus in person. I've never got to do it before.
All right, all you vintage aficionados out there,
we're working on it.
Feel free to get at Cedric on Twitter and tell him that Black Lotus is awesome.
Nah, it sucks in fish. It's really bad, actually. I will have that argument.
See, the funny thing is I agree with you.
I will take that fight. Someone's gonna have to give me a good reason to play it. I mean, I think that fish deck is great. And I'm not really one to play fish decks very often. I think it's great though. No, Tom, leave the token out there.
Yeah, you will hopefully need that.
Yeah, assert your dominance. Leave that thing out there. Tom Ross does win game number 1 over Jared Boettcher, much like yesterday. Tom is Boettcher's kryptonite, apparently. Boettcher can't get by him yet.
Yeah, I mean, someone like Jared Boettcher, who top 8s nearly every tournament he plays in, he's got to have some weakness, right? And if it's someone like Tom Ross, you can't be upset about that.
The man in the leather coat.
Right.
Can't beat him. Ross will be on the draw. Boettcher will be on the play. He will take a look at his opening hand. Again, Boettcher's hand that game was, like, really good.
It was.
Turn 1 Delver, flip it, bolts. Permission.
He was on the play.
Yep. I mean, you can't ask for a lot more. Both players going to keep. Game number 2 underway. Boettcher. Ponder. I think if you're Tom, you're happier to see that than a turn 1 threat like a Delver.
Yeah, if you give Tom enough time to sculpt the perfect hand, he's going to be able to break through as many lightning bolts, swords of plowshares, whatever you can throw at him. So you really need to get that pressure on, and Tom was barely able to do that before the Delver closed out the game in game 1. So for Jared to not have a threat, Tom's got to be happy about that.
To shuffle on the Ponder, too. So I imagine he's pretty pleased with that as well.
Yeah. Of course, that could just mean that Jared's on a different game plan, right? Like the Stoneforge Mystic into Jit and try to get that set up as quickly as possible is arguably the more scary plan from Tom's side.
Now, what makes this matchup a little bit interesting to me, Jared's build of Blue Red Delver is a little bit different. I wonder if Tom knows that, because Tom right now is saying fetch land go.
Yeah.
This deck typically does not have Stifle in it. Does Tom know that Jared plays 3 of these? Jared played 3 in Syracuse when he top-8'd. Well, it's not going to matter right now, as there's a Stoneforge Mystic. We'll see if Tom wants to fight over this or not. It looks like he does. Here's a Force of Will. There's a Spell Pierce. That'll get removed to it as Ross goes to 19.
Jit is a scary card.
Very.
Tom recognizes that.
Let's see if Boettcher wants to battle back. In the tank we go. I mean, this is very clear to me that Boettcher has a force of will, and he's just deciding if he wants to use it, and he says, no, I do not. So Ross will draw. Picks up a copy of Vines of Astwood. See the Inkmoth next in his hand. There's also a Pendelhaven as well, deciding what the second land will be. Looks like he has 2 Vines of Astwood over there. Has a Blighted Agent he can play this turn as well. Does he want to open himself up to Daze? We'll see. Looks like he's come to a decision.
Yeah, Daze is certainly a consideration, but Wasteland also is, you know? I mean, he only has the 1 blue source, and he's kind of relying on that Tropical Island to live so he can cast Spell Pierces on, you know, further turns down the line.
Gonna go with Inkmoth, and he's gonna move in with the Blight Agent. We'll see if this will resolve.
Yeah, it could be potentially disastrous if Jared has something like Daze plus Wasteland. He gets to set Tom back a lot.
I guess what's kind of interesting is what does he Wasteland? If that's like the combination of cards he has.
Yeah.
Do you get Inkmoth off the table? Do you try to color screw your opponent? There's a Brainstorm.
Well, regardless of what you think is correct, where, you know, you as Tom Ross might be like, well, the Inkmoth is more important or whatever. Like, your opponent is more likely to Wasteland that. That doesn't mean that they won't try and mana screw you and hit your Tropical Island.
That's true.
And if that happens, like, how bad is that for you? You have to stop and consider that.
Boettcher will play a main phase Brainstorm here. Again, hasn't played a land just yet, so looks like he does have a Misty Rainforest to make a perfect Brainstorm, but he's got to figure out what he's going to set back and what he's going to shuffle away. And how he's going to try to beat this Blighted Agent, which can really cause a lot of trouble right now. So 2 cards will go back. You see the Misty. Also has a Stoneforge Mystic there as well. He will play the Misty, sacrifice that, go down to 19. And we'll see if it'll be a Volcanic or a Tundra here in just a moment. And it will be a Volcanic very quickly.
Yeah, now the question is, do you go after the creatures with the Lightning Bolt? And I think that's the only piece of removal that Jared has. Or are you back on the Stoneforge Mystic plan? How scared are you of potentially dying next turn to this Blighted Agent? I mean, I know that Jared has a bunch of Force of Wills, but you saw Tom just like break through that last game with basically no problem.
There's Pendelhaven. That can make things a little bit confusing. It's always a delight just to watch Tom play this deck.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out, like, I feel like we're kind of here playing a guessing game a little bit, and Tom is, you know, working all of these calculations through his head. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna. And it's funny because, like, Tom, like, that's the look, right? Like, when Tom's in the tank, like, that's the look. And then when he makes his play, like, then he comes out and he's like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
And, like, he does what he's going to do.
And then he knows.
Yeah. It's like, now it's just like, I have no interest in even pumping. Just take your 1 and then pass the turn back. His turns are, like, really, like, they're really calculated before he does anything. And then, like, he comes to the conclusion, and then and then he just goes, and that's what he does.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not like most people where, like, you make a play and then you kind of think about what your next play is going to be and then you just go from there. Tom thinks about the entire turn.
Yeah.
Stops to think for, like, you know, that small amount of seconds and then plays the entire turn very quickly. And, like, he knows what he's doing on his turn, on probably his opponent's turn, and on his next turn. And that's how far he's thinking ahead. And you really have to with this deck. There are certainly games where you can just, like, go for it and, like, oops, you win.
Yep.
But for the most part, Tom wins a lot with this deck because he is very calculating. He knows when he has to go for it and, you know, how long he has to hold off. And, like, now, Jared has a Stoneforge Mystic. He's showing a Jit. Tom probably doesn't have that he doesn't have a lot of time now.
Umezawa's GT will be searched up by the Stoneforge Mystic before Boettcher does pass the turn back. Still able to rep Lightning Bolt here. Tom drew a copy of Invigorate, so things get a little bit ugly now. He can beat a burn spell. That's not tough. The question is, does he want to move in? Is he happy with the protection that he has in his hand?
Well, if he doesn't move in, potentially Jared can suit up the Jit next turn, although Tom can use a Vines of the Vastawood, which he has a redundant copy in his hand, to buy himself a turn, give the Stoneforge Mystic, is it Shroud or Hexproof?
I think it's Shroud. I think that's the keyword you're looking for. I mean, he won't be able to equip it.
Or
I know what you mean.
It can't be targeted by spells or abilities that aren't yours.
Yes.
So it is neither. It is a weird version of that, but yeah. That's just like one of the cool utility aspects that that card actually has.
It's a Pendelhaven Pumpsky Poo. Make it a 2-3. I just find it like, you know, I was curious, like, is he gonna move now?
Is he gonna move in? Is he gonna move
is he like
halfway in?
Is he moving halfway in? Because this is an attack for 6, which would give Boettcher an impact of 7, and Tom can be like, okay, I'll chip away for 1. Yeah, so now there's going to be a bolt in response to the Invigorate, and it seems to me like Tom wants this to happen.
Yeah, because he can't go the whole way this turn. He doesn't have the double green to play Vines and kick it.
And now, does he want to use a redundant copy of Vines? Does he want to pierce this? Does he want to daze it? He wants to get rid of one of the Vines here. It's so funny. How you sequence these spells matters so much. Now Boettcher's going to fight back with the Force Roller moving a daze.
And that's a pretty good target for Tom's daze.
Uh-huh. So here's my daze. Pick this up. Note that Tom hasn't played a land yet.
Yep, I was about to mention that as well.
Jared has a Force of Will. Oof. So all this stuff gets exchanged. And now Tom ends up picking up his Blight Agent. Nothing works the way he wants to. Now Jared can actually work towards getting this Jin online. So in that exchange, everything breaks correctly for Boettcher.
Yeah. I feel like doing what Tom did was a calculated risk. Obviously, things go completely south if Jared ends up having 2 copies of Force of Will, but you got to think that with a daze that is almost certainly going to be live that turn, but probably not on subsequent turns, like you have to get value out of that, and then, you know, kind of whatever happens, right?
Tom's draw this turn was insane. He picked up a copy of Crows and Grip.
Yep, saw that.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. We didn't really talk about that one very much in sideboarding.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how many of those he brought in, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine all 3.
Yeah.
Because, you know, redundant copies are pretty bad. And you don't want to, you know, open up a hand with like 2 of those.
Right, and also cards like Jit are very slow to get online, and Tom isn't really interested in playing that type of game.
Yeah, Tom's going to grip it and rip it. So get that out of here. GTA is very, very difficult for him to beat. So he'll just take 1, go to 17. Little window open to maybe punch through here with the Inkmoth Nexus. Tom will draw a card. Again, he's got Spell Pierce in his hand. It's getting a little bit worse as we go. See if the boss can figure out what he wants to do on this turn.
I think he's kind of weathered the storm at this point. You know, like the Jit is gone. Jared doesn't have a Delver or anything like that. He's under this Stoneforge Mystic clock. I feel like it's, like, depending on what he drew, it might be time to just start hitting Jared for 2 with the Inkmoth.
I drew a Glistener Elf.
Well, I mean, that certainly helps too.
I thought he might try to get in for 1 there, but he elected not to. I'm a touch surprised by that. And also electing to cast the Glistener Elf with the Trop Vial and not the Pendelhaven.
Yeah.
Now here he comes with this. Now, he could run face first into a Batter Skull, but that's kind of life if that happens, I think.
Right.
Jared searched up and was always GT with the Stoneforge Mystic, so chances of having the Batter Skull are quite slim. Tom will pump, Jared will bolt. Tom will Vines, unkicked.
And you think that's just, oh, there's a
block
block there.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, that's to clearly play around Pierce.
Yeah, well, I thought, I mean, since he blocked, it doesn't matter if you pump it or not,
Yeah.
right? It's not like the Glistener Elf tramples or Vine gives trample or anything. So if it was unblocked, I would question whether or not, you know, Tom was doing that to play around Pierce specifically.
Fire up the Ink Moth, come across here. Pendelhaven's going to target Glistener Elf. You know, there's always the decision there of do I target the Glistener Elf or do I target the land? Because the Ink Moth can die to Wasteland in future turns.
Yeah.
So which one do you want to get swords or bolted? Boettcher just draws and passes. Crop rotation is what Tom found. He'll come in here again, pump again very quickly. Maybe sensing a little bit of weakness. He didn't wait that time.
Do you remember what happened like 4 turns ago?
Oh, where Tom like got his board destroyed?
Yeah, when Tom moved in and then was facing down a Jit.
I do recall that happening. Jared gonna play a Delver here. Tom is gonna untap. Again, Jared sitting at 7 Infect. Tom gonna draw a copy of Tropical Island. There's a Trop. Activate this. Coming on in. Your blocks aren't very good. Pendelhaven here?
Yeah,
Yes.
I like that, saving the Elf. Put Jared up to 8 Infect, and then next turn with Pendelhaven, Ink Moth, it's still lethal, so there's really no reason to just trade the Glistener Elf away.
Tundra. Pass it. Tom can draw, and Tom can just fire both guys attack and then do nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Jared
this is
has to
lethal.
react, and then he can Pendelhaven the other one.
Yep. And that is it. Tom the Boss Ross beats Jared Boettcher again this weekend. 2 games to 0. Blue-green Infect, take it down over blue-white-red Delver. It's an actual masterclass on how to play aggressive decks.
Yeah, I mean, not only did Tom do a lot of things really beautifully, but he also basically got blown out on one of those turns.
Yeah.